So I hope you were able to go through the challenge and try at least to figure out how to get the scoring system going as well as saving the highest. So let's start from the beginning here. Now, I do realize that if you did some research, there's a lot of different ways to do this. Okay, this is one of the ways that I would do it. And of course, you can make it better. There's better ways to do everything, as you very well know by now. So let's think through what we're going to be doing. So as we said before, the first thing we need to do is to just get this scoring system going. Meaning if you are on a question and you say true, you get it true, correct, we want to just add a little text here or add some sort of point system, okay? Let's get that to work first. So how do we do this? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is actually go inside of a model here. I'm going to create a new class. Okay, we don't have to, but I like creating classes because that abstracts out compartments of our code. So I'm going to call this score. So enter. So this score for now will just have one thing only. So it's going to have, say, private int score. Okay, go ahead and create a constructor. In this case, I just want an empty constructor. Okay, and I'm going to create of course, some few getters and setters. There we go. Getters get score and set score. Not a big deal. Very good. So the next thing I'm going to do here inside of our main activity, I'm going to create a counter. I'm going to call this a score counter. So I'm going to say private int score counter. And I'm going to set it to 0 to begin with, right? Very good. Now we have our score counter. This is going to be the one counter that will allow us to add the score as we go, meaning as users play the game, they're getting the score and so forth. But how do we then get this to work? So the next thing we need to look at here is where is it exactly we're going to be calling or we're going to be incrementing the score. So I like to put things inside of methods or of functions, okay? But before we go anywhere, we need to instantiate also here at the top, or at least create an instance variable for our score. Okay, I'm going to call this score, like that. And I have to import that, of course, just hit enter, and then we have our score imported here so that this class here knows where to get our score. All right, so let's see, it's here, down there. Very good. So we have our score inside of main here. The first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to say score is equal to new score, like that. There we go. So now we have instantiated our score object. Okay, very good. So we are going to use that score object to then to then go in and probe in and get, for instance, get score and set score. Okay, very good. How do we do that? Well, first of all, we need to understand what is the concept behind this. So the first concept here is whenever we click on a button, in this case, if the button is true, meaning the user actually got the question correct, that's when we want to add the score or increment our counter score. Now, where do you think we would do? We could come here instead of a true and put it here, but that wouldn't work because at this point, we haven't checked whether the question is true or not. So the candidate, you will imagine, is going to be on the check question. So I'm going to click here. So here is going to be where we're going to be able to add the score to increment or decrement, if you will, the score of the user. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create another two methods actually. The first one, I'm going to say private void add points, like that. So what this is going to do? Well, this is going to do one simple thing. This will go ahead and increase the counter. So I'm going to say score counter. I'm going to increase by 100. So that is what I call our multiplier or adder, if you will. So you can change this number. This is the increment as the user gets questions correct. By how much do we want to increment, right? So this is a random number that I'm getting here. So I can say I'm going to increment this as such by 100. So for each question they get right, I'm going to increment by 100. So our score increment or score counter is going to go by 100. And next, I need to do the following. I already have the score object that I instantiated at the top. I can go ahead and set score to our score counter, just like that. All right, and I can log D, and I can say here, for instance, I'm going to see what is the score at this point. I can say score.get score. Easy. Of course, we have to add here. I'm just going to go ahead and add something like score. Okay. So this add point here, let's see if that works. I'm going to copy and call it where. Well, I want to call it where the answer is correct. So that'll be there. All right. So there's C. There we go. I'm going to save this and give it a run. So if it all goes well, we're going to be able to see something happening. Let's open our logcat there so we can see if something happens. So I'm going to make sure it's debug and say s score like this, because that's what we want to look for, score. And let's go ahead and give it a run. So it's running now. This is indeed false. I'm going to click false, and voila, we get add points 100. If I keep going to the next one, this is false. Now I'm up to 200. Can continue. This is false, and so forth. Of course, the contrary to that, we are not going to be able to subtract the points, or users won't be able to list points yet. But that's not the point. So at least we know that our add points is working, and that is indeed very important. Okay, very good. So that is the concept. Now, how would we do the opposite of this, which would be deduct points? So I can come down here. If I can copy this and call this deduct points. Okay, there's better names out there. In this case here, I want to subtract 100. But here's the problem. If we do subtract 100 like that and set the counter as we did here and everything is good, we're going to have a problem, because there are times, let's say the user is at 0 and the first question they come in and they are at 0. That means if we go and get one wrong, we're going to have minus 100 points. And that's not a good idea. You know, scoring systems usually don't go to negative numbers. You could if you want to get it that way, but it's just very confusing. So how do we count for that? Well, what we can do, we can just go ahead and put an if statement. We're going to say if, okay, if score counter is greater than 0, that's the only time we're going to be able to subtract things. Right? So in fact, I'm going to copy this and put inside there. So if score counter is greater than 0, that's when we're going to be able to set our score to whatever we have subtracted. So if the score counter is 100, so 100 is greater than 0, that means we can actually subtract 100, because then we're going to get a 0. So that's fine. But if score counter is 0, 0 is not greater than 0, so this is not going to run. But something needs to run. Well, I'm going to say else. I'm just going to go ahead and set the score counter. So set score counter. I'm just going to give it 0, and then I'm going to say score dot set score to score counter. Okay, let's log D right now here, so we can see. Let's see, score bad, something like that. Just to differentiate, I'm going to go ahead and say score dot get score. All right, let's see if this works. Well, it's not going to work because we need to actually call this where we're losing. So this here is where we will be losing. So I'm going to put right there. Let's go ahead and run. All right, so now it's all empty because it's running again. Let's go ahead and try this. I'm going to say false, that's true, there's 100. If I say true again, we're going to say it's 0. So it went back to 0. Now our score is 0. So if we go to wrong again, it's just not going to give a negative 100 because it's at 0. We said so there. So we have that flexibility. We have that if statement there to check to make sure that we don't end up with negative numbers. All right, so we can keep going. That's true. It's still going there. Let's say false. That is correct. 200. Let's keep going. That is false. We have 300 and so forth. So our system is working quite well at this point. Okay, so we should be happy about this. Now, the next thing we need to do here is, of course, to add the actual number here, right? The actual score at the top. So to do that, we can go back to our activity main, close this down, as well as this, maybe a little bit bigger. We're going to add another text view here. So I'm going to open our palettes there. I have a text. I want a text view. Let's put right there. And I want this to be something like that. And then this is going to be connected to our bottom there. And this is going to be connected to that. All right. That looks quite nice. And I could, let's give this score text. That's a nice ID. I'm going to just get rid of that. And let's see if we can add a different font. Perhaps the same font Chewy that we saw, added for everything else to be consistent. And maybe size to be maybe 24. We'll see how that will work. All right, so we have our text there. We have the score text. Going back to our main here, we do the same thing we've always done. So we're going to get our text. So private text view, score text view. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and instantiate it. doesn't matter where. So score text view, find by ID, r.id, score text. There we go. So we have our score text. Now we can actually change the score text, if you will. So where do we do that? Let's go to our methods where we're calling everything, right? So once we set, we can just go ahead and call text view dot set text, and we can say score dot get score. I'm going to copy this again, copy it and put it out there, as well as, just in case, we're going to put it all there. Let's see what's going to happen. Let's run this one more time. Okay, so let's keep going here. Let's see. This is false and we have an issue. What is the problem? Let's open our run here. Right, because this score.getText, let's go back to our score Java, the get score, it returns an integer. This is one thing that it's easy to overlook in Android development here, is that now we are saying at the bottom here, where is it? When we want to return our score text view, or setting our score text view, which is a text, so it wants to get a text, we're passing here an integer. So that is a problem, right? So we need to convert this into an actual string representation of the int. So there's different forms to do this, but you can use the string dot value of, so we can pass then the actual result. So the string dot value of, it takes the integer and makes it into a string. That way, then the set text of our text view can accept it. Save this, let's give a run. We hopefully should see something actually working here. All right, let's go ahead and say true, and voila, there's 100. Let's go to next, National Weather Service. I think that's also false. That's true, there's 200. And I can continue. That is false, and you see our points is actually working. Say right, it goes back to 0. So if you go say yes, 100, keep going. This is also false, 200. If I say true when it's false, and we have that problem again there. All right, so we're going to be able to solve that issue in the next video.